private yacht. We got any Ludacris fans out there? The actual Ludacris, rapper, entrepreneur, and true star of the 2007 holiday classic, Fred Claus, opened his set in front of a small group of business people in button-downs and thick glasses with this query. His question was greeted with a lukewarm response, but Mr. Chris was not thrown. Instead, he continued his mini-concert on the boat's bow as we cruised around the Miami coast. The client hired me to do strolling magic for 3 hours. There were roughly 50 passengers on this boat, myself included, so I quickly ran out of people to show card tricks. My friend John calls strolling magic creative hiding, so I spent most of my time hiding on the second-floor art gallery. Yes, this small boat was still big enough to have an art gallery. Near the end of the cruise, I would also see Ludacris and his large bodyguard hiding there. It is comforting when two very different art forms still have something in common. After we finally docked, I spent another 20 minutes trying to find the agent who was supposed to have a check for me. Finally, she pulled out a booklet of blank checks from the 70s and hand-wrote it. At that moment, I was curious if Ludacris made 10, 100, or 1,000 times as much as I did that day, but I did not ask. 2 days later, the check bounced. I wondered if Luda's did too. Variety show. One night, a famous uncle from a classic 90s sitcom was in the audience. He was more handsome in person. I did not seek him out after the show, but he was standing in the parking lot as I was heading to my car. He was surrounded, unsurprisingly, by pretty women. They were chatting and smiling. As I got close, we both made eye contact. In my mind, doves flew over his head and Gary Wright's Dreamweaver played in the background. He smiled and said, "Nice job." I was at a loss for words. A TV hero I grew up with in my living room had just complimented me. In my mind, his TV band would suddenly turn the corner and start serenading me with that only song they ever played. Then, if I was lucky, the other famous uncle from the program would appear and demand they cut it out. None of that happened, and I snapped back to reality. Finally, I blurted, yeah, thanks. See you next time." I looked at the ground and shuffled back to my car. I thought, well, that was embarrassing, but I'm sure it's fine. Then, almost like a sound wave reminded me of the social pain of middle school, I heard an eruption of laughter from the group. One girl joked, "Yeah, see you on set." Another howled, "Yeah, see you later." I did not look back. I pretended not to hear and quickly packed up my car. Moral: never meet your sitcom heroes' groupies. Casino. As I brushed powdered, shiny silver makeup on my face, a 4-hour shift was about to start as a silver living statue person in a Detroit casino. Soon I would be surrounded by neon blinking lights, music from the early 2000s, and people who would make poor financial decisions. In the 3 years I spent there, only a few jackpots ever hit. The house always wins, and the house has enough extra cash to pay for a person to stand still. Fall was beginning, which meant the new season of Saturday Night Live was going to premiere that night. The difference that year was two former classmates, whom I'd shared a lot of stage time with at the Second City Chicago Training Center, were now featured cast members on the late-night show. I stood on my box covered in silver, thinking about how careers can start in the same educational location but take two completely different routes. There would always be two of us, and we would be dressed up in various rock and roll outfits, depending on what costume was dropped off by the overworked, underprepared lady who booked it. The Blues Brothers were my favorite. Michael Jackson was my least favorite, mostly because people would ask me to sing or moonwalk on constant repeat throughout the night. We had a long-term contract with the casino. Even though I didn't live in Detroit, I would commute in from Chicago and eventually Orlando because casinos have ridiculous budgets for entertainment. Especially by year 3, management forgot we were still there but continued to pay us. Some nights I would try to be as lazy as possible, sitting down, leaning, and blatantly watching the television in the bar behind me. No one ever noticed. They had higher stakes things to focus on, like card counting. Honestly, some didn't even know we were real. Sets of 45 minutes on and 15 minutes off dragged on for 4 hours a night, 3 nights a week. This was before Apple AirPods, so I would sneak a giant Bluetooth headset underneath the afro wig on my head and consume hours of podcasts while I robotically waved to the casino goers. I'd often be up there with my mentor and mime teacher Michael. He is a classic movie star quality and is a physical theater expert who trained with Marcel Marceau. When people find out he is a mime, they often start to do the classic tired trope of a white-faced man stuck in a box. He politely stops them and explains, "That is like trying to box with Muhammad Ali. Just don't do it." Despite the depressive emotions a casino can sometimes elicit, Michael kept it positive and reminded me, "Our job is to bring light to the darkness." These things were often said as I'd see an 80-year-old shout at an electronic screen. Fascinating how the same people who can't operate email instinctively understand money robots. You'd see the same patrons over and over. I would often break character and ask, "You win today?" And the answer would always be a resounding, "Not yet." Fridays and Saturdays would get pretty wild at times. My face is in hundreds of bachelorette party photographs. Groups of drunken women with various party favors that resemble male genitalia draped around their outfits mob me. I would smile and robotically wave while the bride-to-be would slur, "Talk! Why don't you talk?" Anytime someone would tell me to talk, I wouldn't because I found joy in seeing how long someone could ask me to speak. Usually, it was a few minutes, and then they would get frustrated and angrily stumble off. The brunch shift could get pretty dull. A casino at 1 p.m. on a Sunday is a sad place to be. Standing motionless in an empty room is mentally exhausting. Time moves at a slower rate. You lose track of your surroundings. I have compassion for parking attendants and security guards who spend their days sitting down, observing the world through a stationary window. And that's when danger can strike. One day I noticed a small man walking towards me at a relatively rapid rate. He wasn't making eye contact or even really acknowledging my existence, which is odd because I was a Silver Blues brother standing on a giant box in a very empty casino on his direct path. He approached my legs, and before I could even move my eyes, he snapped his hand at my groin. In what is now replayed in slow motion, I instinctively grabbed his baseball cap and started smacking him in the face with it. He covered his head and ran away to the bar. No one seemed to notice any of this theatrical drama. But then again, this is a casino, and you could literally walk through it naked, and no one would take their eyes off the glow of electric theoretical free money. Luckily for me, he had terrible aim, and missed the danger zone completely. Still, I couldn't ignore what had happened. I got off my box, sprinted to security, and shared my story. Within minutes, the small man was being dragged out of the casino by a much larger man shouting, "You're not supposed to move!" Apparently, I failed his test for being a good statue man. Security allowed me to press charges, but my shift was almost up. I didn't feel like explaining to the police, A, why he punched me, and B, why I was being paid to stand still. I didn't have an answer for either. Side note, this is how I paid off my student loans. Magic Theater. In tonight's show, a small child said he could solve the Rubik's Cube in under 1 minute. It was show number 7 that weekend, and I was in a mental state of needing something new to happen for my own sanity. So I gave him the unsolved cube an audience member had just finished mixing up. He bravely walked up on stage and solved it in precisely 1 minute. The crowd went nuts, half leapt to their feet, cheering and thrilled for this kid's accomplishment. To anyone over 30, this was a gosh darn miracle. After the show, his parents told me he was also a world chess champion who donated his winnings back to India so kids with eye problems could get surgery. I just met the real Buddha. There is hope for humanity. The next night, a 20-something man claimed he could also solve the cube in 3 minutes. Based on the high of the previous night's success, I brought him on stage to try it again, hoping for another life-affirming moment for myself and the audience. 2 minutes in, it was clear things were not going to end on the same note. Shortly after, embarrassed, he admitted defeat. Not wanting him to look like a failure in front of 100 people, I secretly solved the cube in a paper bag and handed it to him. When I gave him the cue, he triumphantly revealed it. The audience gave a half-hearted cheer like you would when a small child correctly identifies a shape. Always send them back a hero.